After an African-American police officer shot and killed Keith Lamont Scott, who also is African-American, in an apartment complex about 15 minutes from Bank of America Stadium. The question has been raised if the Panthers should be hosting an NFL game this Sunday against the Vikings. Quite a few sports figures in the community have spoken on the social unrest plaguing the city. Here's Panthers linebacker Thomas Davis and tight end Greg Olsen.
I stand before you guys and I'm talking about this and I'm trying to explain it to my kids to understand that, you know, police are here to protect and serve us. And at the same time, someone has to be held accountable for what's going on. You know, and it's above and beyond our scale as athletes and what we can do.
I think we all recognize that games can bring great peace and can give great escape to people. And I think for our city now, with the struggles we have going on and the issues at hand, is the game itself as important as the issues at hand? No. It's more of what the symbol of what the game is rather than score, wins and losses and touchdowns. I think there's a lot more at play when the NFL takes the field on Sundays, bigger than the game.
Michael Jordan, of course, who owns the Charlotte Hornets, came out with this statement yesterday. In light of the tragic events of the past 3 days, it is more important than ever that we restore calm and come together as a community in peaceful demonstration and conversation and in constructive and non-violent ways. NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy said we are planning to play the game as scheduled on Sunday. Stephen A., this begs for the question to be asked, should there be a game played in Charlotte this week?
Absolutely, without question. It shouldn't even be a thought. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to consider here. The game should go on, and it should go on right there in Charlotte, in downtown Charlotte. I don't give a damn if the National Guard is there or not, if local police officers are there or not. Obviously, you're going to have security at every game. We understand that. But the point is, nothing brings society together in America, as far as I'm concerned, better than sports. It's the closest thing to a meritocracy that we have. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, Jew, Gentile, Native American, Asian, Latino, it does not matter. Everybody comes together when it comes to sports because you're rooting for that same team. I particularly love the fact that Greg Olsen and Thomas Davis both spoke. I know both guys. Greg Olsen is a friend of the show. He's a phenomenal person, and I thought that his points were absolutely phenomenal, and they're to be commended because he talked about it, not necessarily, the game is not necessarily more important than that, but at the same time, it's symbolic because no matter what trials and tribulations you endure, you must move on and you must move forward. As it pertains to what Thomas Davis said, I think his approach was apropos as well. His statement was apropos when he said, you know, it's above him in terms of trying to decipher the nuances of the situation and what should and shouldn't be done. But he speaks for a lot of black people when he spoke out and said, there must be consequences for your actions. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, this officer, this female officer named Betty Shelby, 42 years of age, was arrested and charged with manslaughter. She was in jail for about 20 minutes before $50,000 bond was posted for her. But ultimately, she has been charged with manslaughter, and there's a possible chance that she may actually do some jail time. We don't know what the situation is with this officer in Charlotte, whether the alleged victim, Keith Lamont Scott, had a gun or a book, or whatever the case may be, whether the officer was black or white. There's some questions here that need to be answered, and we need due diligence put forth by the Attorney General, by local and state officials to address the matter as expeditiously as possible. But in the end, what it comes down to is, in the face of all of that, the games have to be played because you can't have situations like this derailing what we're accustomed to doing as a society. People out there have a legitimate beef. There is no question. I am a black man. These shootings are something that's incredibly alarming, and they absolutely positively need to be addressed. But there were a few, not many, not all, but there were a few individuals out there vandalizing and robbing stores and stuff like that. And folks get upset when somebody like me or others bring it up. Get the hell over it. Damaging your own neighborhoods and damaging business that likely employ black folks. To make your point, ultimately, you're going to end up hurting yourself. Protesting is one thing. Doing harm to other human beings, vandalizing businesses that ultimately could potentially compromise your employment in the city that you live in is just not intelligent. And that needs to be said, which is why I applaud Michael Jordan's statement, because he said the right thing, Thomas Davis said the right thing, and Greg Olson said the right thing. The games absolutely, positively should be played this Sunday in Charlotte. We move forward. That's what we do as a nation here in the United States of America. We always move forward.
I want to address quickly the vandalism point you bring up, Stephen A. If you get a crowd of people together, especially spontaneously, hundreds or numbering even in the thousands, there are going to be some people who misbehave oftentimes.
Sure.
Doesn't represent the entire group.
It does not.
And it's an easy and convenient way for people to sweep the issue under the rug. Look, vandals. Well, a small percentage of that population did vandalize property. That's true.
That's why I said a small percentage.
Yep.
Right.
The question as to whether the game should play, I believe, is yes, for the same reasons you believe it's yes. The history of our country has been, during the Second World War, FDR, our president, wrote to Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of baseball, and said, you got to play baseball. We want you to play baseball. This is an important, not only is it good for the economy, according to FDR at the time, but it's an important distraction for our country, and it's a unifying kind of force. After 9/11, at the earliest time where it made sense, you know, they had to clean up the debris. Thousands of people were killed in the attack. But as soon as it made sense to start playing games again, they started playing games again. There were sporting events throughout New York City. It's, as you mentioned, a unifier, sports, because in a given city, it is maybe the only thing, certainly it is a thing, that cuts across all socioeconomic and racial lines. Living in L.A. just now for the last 5.5 years, I'm born and bred in New York. I live in New York now, but I lived in L.A. for almost 6 years. And Los Angeles would be a kind of series of connected suburbs, if not for the Lakers, basically. What else? I try to think of what other places, the Dodgers, especially the Lakers, do people from all walks of life in L.A., which is geographically and economically segregated, where do they all come together in one place physically for a common cause? It's the Lakers. It's actually the thing, I believe, that makes Los Angeles a city in the first place. Really, we think about what a city's supposed to mean. So we constantly hear things about the kind of work in the community that a team does and the way a team is interwoven into the fabric of a community. Here is its benefit. At a time like this, precisely, is its benefit. You play the game, and it can have a kind of unifying force in a city, and in this case, Charlotte. Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. And listen, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm making the point not to sit up there and try to paint all the folks out there who were protesting with a broad brush. I'm actually coming to their defense by saying the vast majority of them, you understand, were out there doing what they were supposed to do, doing what they have every right to do, and conducting themselves, you know, like model citizens, but exercising their rights under our Constitution. I mean, they have the right to protest. They have a right to voice dissent. And to do so peacefully is all the better. But the few vandals that are out there, they do irreparable harm from a stereotypical perspective in terms of tainting the actions of the many, because the actions of the many were not like that at all. But there's always a few bad apples. But you and I both know that a vast majority of Americans who obviously disagree with their position. I think we got somebody from the Seattle Mariners, for example, that spoke out, and he's in a world of trouble. He's some backup catcher because he decides to voice his dissent against those protesting in Charlotte. And we saw the perspective upon which he provided. But it was fed off of the few vandals that were out there conducting themselves like a bunch of hooligans, and basically, you know, conducting themselves in a fashion that stigmatized those who were trying to do the right things. And so these are the kind of things that we have to make sure that we point out.
Incidentally,
we got to make sure we point out. I'm sorry, go ahead,
No,
Max.
you
Go
bring
ahead.
up the backup catcher from Seattle, and he said he had comments on Twitter that I felt reflected ignorance about the subject matter.
Yeah.
But I also don't want, and of course you have the right to say what you want and express yourself in this country. You're also responsible for what you say, and he's responsible for what he says. But I hope that people don't take that to mean that they should kind of have now put pressure to bear that has a chilling effect on his ability to speak his mind. Because I think it's much more constructive when folks talk about it and point out the ignorance than simply silence the dissenting voice. In this case, the backup catcher from Seattle has a dissenting voice, which I feel is incorrect, misinformed, and underinformed, and maybe also fueled by some bad stuff. And I still would not want to see him silenced. I would want to see him, I want to see his points engaged and proven wrong on the merits.
I agree with you, but here's where it gets tricky. I am of the mindset, as shockingly as it may come across to people, I don't think anything should happen to him. He's free to be ignorant. You got to deal with the consequences in terms of people criticizing you for your opinions, but it's not like I think that the Seattle Mariners should cut him or they should get rid of him because he expressed himself. You understand? So on its face, I think that I agree with you there. Here's the problem, particularly when it comes to African Americans in this country. If he were black and it was a white issue that was permeating, just sifting through our country right now, the way this issue is, and you were a black person and you spoke out in that fashion against that cause on behalf of white folks, or in this particular case, against a white person or white folks and what they were protesting, what would happen to that black person? See, this is the kind of stuff that black folks are trying to bring to the attention of America as a whole. It's about fairness. My boy Jeff Brown in California religiously says, Steve, fair is a place where they judge pigs. It doesn't exist. He says that all the time. Unfortunately, most black people feel exactly that. Fairness is not a part of the equation. The difference is that you are now dealing with a new generation that's on the come up, that's tired of the unfairness. They want fairness. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean that, okay, you're going to benefit and life is going to be softer on you. No. If it's got to be hard on black folks, make sure it's hard on everybody else.
I hear what you're saying, and I have a very opposite point of view on that. I agree it should be fair, and it's not. And often reactions are different based on across racial lines. But I would say rather than lowering the standards for folks who haven't been oppressed, let's raise the standards for folks who have. So in this case, you're right.
Well,
oftentimes a dissenting black voice will be shouted down or otherwise pressured. But I would stand up and say, no, we need to hear what this person has to say, even if the other side feels they're wrongheaded. Just like it's been brought up in recent days. Look who's been captured alive in this country by law enforcement. That doesn't mean I wish that law enforcement would have shot them dead. But it means I wish law enforcement would use the same standards for black folk that they do for other folks.
Right. Yeah, we agree. We agree there. My last point is this. At the end of the day, the most important component is fairness. It's not about elevating or lowering or dissipating, even though we would prefer elevation. The point is make sure it's fair. Because as long as it's fair, then ultimately you assist in bringing everybody together because everybody's suffering the same or everybody's prospering the same. It's when there's discrepancy that you have problems, not when everybody's together.
Agreed.
Appreciate the dialogue. We have to leave it there, though, gentlemen.